before history was written, before nations rose and fell, there was a story humanity could never forget. A war. Not one of just great kings and great nations, but of cosmic principles. Not fought on Earth alone, but woven into the fabric of reality itself. Order rising from chaos in Mesopotamia, light versus dark in Persia, an eternal clash of cosmic balance in India. In Greece, the gods waging war through human affairs, and ultimately a rebellion in the heavens that spilled onto Earth. Different cultures, different names, but the same pattern, the same memory, preserved in story and in myth. So today we ask ourselves, are these really just myths? Or are they fragments of a larger story that humanity once knew? What's good, everybody? Thank you for being here. This topic, this cosmic struggle that we're going to go through, has been spurred on by a lot of these questions that I've been getting from a friend of mine relating to, like, hey, this sounds a lot like this story, and this one sounds like this, and this and that. And I pieced together at least a good amount of decent, I don't even want to call it, I'm no expert, but from what I've been reading or looking at or studying, things that are fascinating, I thought these would be good ones. So we're going to go to the idea of this cosmic battle, this cosmic war, that then somehow, the stories are different in how they get here, but it still shares the same idea that whatever's happening in the cosmic heavens above bleed down to us. And that's kind of a shared thing. It's just how it's interpreted or how it's viewed in the story that really changes. So I'll just give you the overview of what I think are good source material for this topic. So we're going to go through some Zoroastrianism, some ancient Mesopotamia, Sumerian stories, the Greek and Roman period. Of course, we're going to go through the Vedic traditions, Hinduism, and then what really builds into this idea, at least in the Western world, of this early apocalypticism, early Jewish Christian ideology, and then work through the historical context of all of those, then through the stories, and then kind of frame how these stories are explored. And I think that's a good way to kind of give, it's what I would want if I had this question. Like, oh, are they different or are they the same? We're going to work through all of those. So we'll start with section 1. So I wanted to begin with how old are the stories, right? Like, what are the dating? What are consensus on how they became to be the version that we have now in these different traditions? So, of course, the earliest would be the Sumerian, the Mesopotamian. So that's the Enuma Elish, right? 1900 to 1600 BCE, roughly. And, Enuma Elish is actually a really decent read. Again, I have this book, but, there's a ton of these tablets that are just fascinating to me. Like I'm reading them and I'm like, holy crap. Because it's so far in the past that we forget, oh, they're just like you and me. Like, yeah, they don't have computers and science and all these microphones, right? All these fancy things, but they're similar in the way that they perceive and think the way that we do. And it's just so far away that we can't even try to understand or comprehend what it is that they're doing because it's so far away. But the Enuma Elish, that's the earliest one. Then you get this Vedic tradition, so it's before, I'm pretty sure it's all under the umbrella of Hinduism. I don't want to misspeak, but the Vedic traditions are the earliest sources from within Hinduism. So, the Rigveda, which is this Vedic era, about 1500 BCE. So just right after 100 years or so past this Enuma Elish, like the latest dating for that one. And then you get into where the real idea of like this dualism of good and evil comes from, and including that's even for the early apocalypticism and Jewish tradition that bleeds into early Christianity, is right from Zoroastrianism in the Persian Empire. So, and again, I got the 4th century CE for like a standardized version, but I guess tradition says orally it would have been 1500 to like 1000 BCE. And, you know, meet in the middle, let's say 1200 to 1000. Cool? And so that is Zarathustra giving these teachings and describing this dualism of, you know, good and evil, light and dark. And then you get into the classical Greek, or the classical Greek period, the archaic Greek period, whatever you want to call it, where you have, you know, like the Iliad, right? So these Homeric epics and these stories that then get to be stabilized, you know, again, I think it was, you know, the way that the Iliad is kind of structured and worded is meant to be spoken. So you're supposed to like perform it almost, which is amazing because I can barely remember a freaking phone number, and they can remember the Odyssey and the Iliad, or I guess the Iliad then the Odyssey, around 800 to 700 BCE. And all of these bleed down into what I would call, at least for me, this Western idea of the light and dark dualism, the Second Temple period for the early Jewish people, and then this early Roman period where Christianity then flourishes and grows. And that's about 200 BCE to 100 CE, right? So the Dead Sea Scrolls, 3rd century BCE, and then you have the New Testament, which is like 1st century CE. Again, some of the books are later, but like I think the latest date that I found for thinking Revelations or Apocalypse of John is like 95, like the earliest is 95 CE. So from those stories here, coming down into Western ideology, there are some like key notes, key contextual things to know. So again, I already told you that this light versus dark dualism from Zoroastrianism, many scholars are going, oh yeah, that significantly influenced, you know, all the Jewish, Christian, and then later Islamic concepts of what we call spiritual warfare. And then this figure, this devil figure, this person being that adversarial figure. And then the antiquity of the Vedic traditions it's one of the oldest like Indo-European texts. So it's the Deva and it looks like Asura, I think is what it was called. But this struggle is to create this order from chaos. And in that really does sound like, how do I put this? I'm not saying it's ripping it from it, but because they're so close to Mesopotamian traditions, it's kind of the same thing. And then the Mesopotamian text really influenced the ancient Near East. So when we get down to it, you have this Persian empires or Zoroastrianism, and then you get the Canaanites and this land of Canaan, and you get the Ugaritic text, which is also in cuneiform. And you kind of can see this blending of these ideas and how they can move through, and it's all this defining cosmic battle of, you know, struggle, right? How do we define suffering and all the things that we struggle with now to understand, me too, they're the same thing, same conflict, same issues. How do we wrestle with this idea? And I think it's really cool to put ourselves in that position to go, oh, we're not the first ones to try to dissect this thing or try to figure out what the meaning to all this chaos could be, right? Maybe it's creating order, but we also have to participate, and it's just these different ideas that all circle through. But anyway, so that's our historical framework for those stories. And well, here, now we'll go through now that we kind of have the history, we'll go through the details. Because, again, Zoroastrianism is the most explicit example of this cosmic battle. So this whole cause is that spanning this 12,000 years between this Ahura Mazda, right, which is this supreme god of light and truth, and then Angra, I knew I was going to mispronounce it, Angra Mainyu, Mainyu sounds like it'd be closer, is this evil spirit of darkness, right, and lies, right, the lies, darkness, deception, sounds very, very similar to very early Christian ideology. Now, the cause, the why, is that human life is caught in this battle. Like, it's not saying that, we're the cause, right? We're just caught in this struggle, and we have to pick a side, essentially, which is we can choose as humans in this story to align ourselves with truth or the lie, right? So that means conflicts aren't just like random. It's a necessary part of keeping balance, right? Separating order and chaos, right? And we're an active participant caught in this battle, and we have to choose. And I feel like that's a very relatable thing to all of us. We're like, yeah, that makes sense. That's not too far-fetched. But in the Mesopotamian, right? So the earliest one. So I put Zoroastrianism because it seems like the most relatable one that we all could probably grasp. We're like, yeah, but that makes sense. And then we're an active participant, right? We can choose, right? That's exactly what I would do. I go, that makes sense. Now, this Mesopotamian, so the earliest version of this cosmic balancing, the Enuma Elish, is that this conflict is the result of the original chaotic struggle amongst the gods. So they all had a fight, and then this is the result. So the cause, which again, it's this Babylonian creation epic, describes the younger gods who create disorder. And this piece also sounds a ton of like, the Olympians and the Titans in Greek history. And so the younger gods create disorder, and they, prompt, right? They like poke and nudge by creating this imbalance, this primeval chaotic Tiamat, this goddess, to attempt to destroy them because their things are going out of whack. You guys are messing with stuff. Cut it out. I have to destroy you. I have to do something about it. So the why for the conflict is that the gods themselves they had personified human traits. So jealousy, rage, animosity, right? Their human strife is this direct reflection almost of this divine nature that is not steady, it's turbulent, right? It's up and down and left and right, and also a very human idea. It's not like they're perfect, right? And so the result from this epic is that human war is seen as the inevitable outcome of divine instability. So that requires constant ritual, just like many of the ancient Near East traditions. Why is ritual so important? Because it's to manage and maintain this order. You have to, or else things go out of whack. Which again is also super Greek. It's super Roman. Right? Why do we do these conflicts? Oh, and now in the Western world, we're like, these pagan traditions are so sinful and bad. They're trying to figure out how they keep balance. How we need to keep order, right? We got to keep order down here so we can keep order up there. So none of it, just like our stories, bleed down here to us. It makes sense too. So, since we're talking about Greek, we'll in Greek and Roman, these divine whims and the fates that play, right? The gods frequently acted. They're active participants, just like the Iliad, just like the Odyssey, right? They interact with humans, and they also interact in human warfare. So humans are now the proxy for their rivalry and essentially like how petty they are, right? I choose this, or like I'm better than you, or blah blah blah, and then they use humans to do this, almost like the human conflict is the like drama, right? Like it's a ritual drama that mirrors how these divine like disagreements occur. So like they're having a fight, and they are like, we can't do anything. We can't really do anything to each other. We can kind of mess with each other, but how do we do it? We're going to use the people to go to war and then champion our sides, and then we'll see who wins, right? So we're kind of like, the world is the chessboard, we're the pieces, and the gods can do whatever they want. That's kind of this reason for the Greek and Roman period, why conflict is even around, right? This divine conflict. Now, that means these earthly battles are either, if you lose, I assume, that is your punishment, right? It's a punishment from the gods. You didn't do enough. So if they see it as this punishment based on we didn't uphold ritual, we didn't, keep things in balance, that's why, okay, got it, we have to fix that, right? And kind of feels like scapegoating it a little bit if you lose, right? You're like, darn it. Hermes wasn't on my side. Hera wasn't on my side. Dang it. Those gods, curse them, right? Like it just feels like it's one of those. But if you really believe it, then this really resonates with them. And I put those two together because they very much represent one another. I've never looked it up. If I find it, I'll put it right here. But I know that there's some bleed through with, that general area, early Anatolia, right? The early Greeks, and then the ancient Near East, because of Mesopotamian context, kind of bleeding into one another, and then the stories kind of have the same, kind of the same taste to it a little bit, right? Might be a different fish, still sushi, right? I don't know where that analogy came from, but another interesting one that I'm getting into, I feel like I'll have more of these in the future, these videos about the Vedic traditions and then Hinduistic ideology, the struggle of this Devas and the Asuras, right? Which, again, the later version from the historical context are these Puranas and the Mahabharata. So the Vedic text, kind of different. They're the earliest source of this, but then you get the wars later. That's where these are. So these describe these ongoing cosmic battles between the righteousness and the malevolent forces. In these stories, the cause is gods, which are the forces of light, these devas, and the demons, the asuras, which are the forces of darkness and chaos. It's their battle. So this universe is that constant, eternal state of struggle between good and evil, right? Which also feels very much like Zoroastrianism, where, the cosmic order, Dharma, is threatened by the demonic forces. It looks like Adharma, kind of what it looks like. Now, the result of this is that human conflict, such as war, and this is like the Bhagavad Gita, which I have that I'm going through, is considered the necessary act to restore righteousness. So it shows that human participation in general has a much larger cosmic duty to uphold than just like fighting one another. This is about balancing things. Now, we get down to early Jewish apocalypticism and then early Christian text. Don't know why that's exciting. Now, these are all heavily influenced by, again, this apocalyptic literature, which, again, puts this cosmic lens on earthly suffering. Again, remember the context of early Jewish history is also ancient Near East history. So this cosmic conflict is in heaven before earth, and then it's usually which ironically, Tiamat is the dragon. In this story, it's also a dragon, but then later you get some of these other stories where then it becomes Satan that rebelled against God. The dragon piece, that is something interesting to me. I don't know where that's taking me yet, but I feel like that's important somehow. I feel like that's a good tie-in to the ancient Near East and all the traditions from there, even maybe some of the Ugaritic texts. But the whole point of this conflict is that the Satan figure, the devil, had been defeated in heaven in this war already in the cosmos, but then attempts to try round two, right, to make war on the creation of God. Now, meaning that from this result, human conflict is then interpreted as the war zone environment, right? Oh my God, this is where the evil powers act through human actors to get their way. And again, that would be like the Dead Sea, the War Scroll, or Apocalypse of John, Revelation. And that also feels very much like the same context that it's in, right? The early Greek poems of human people, human actors being these pawns for, instead of multiple different gods in this pantheon, it's just one, right? Now, that's also interesting. I'm getting two blends. Now as I go through it as a whole, I'm seeing these traditions blending into another, which is why I kind of wanted to mention same story, same memory, same feeling of what this is right here, right? I can see them blended together. And I kind of wanted to, that seems like a good overview. And then I kind of wanted to go, I have enough time, we should do it. So there are these cosmic stories, we're going to explore them a little bit. So we'll start historically with the Enuma Elish, and then work our way through history. So the whole explanation for why this battle, so the battle for order in the Enuma Elish, is the chaotic universe was tamed into a structured civilization. Now, the gods, the younger gods, disturbed the primordial parents, right? So Apsu and Tiamat. So Apsu is, the fresh water, and then Tiamat is the salt water. Now, I'm pretty sure Ea is Enki, but Apsu was killed by the god Ea. Tiamat raised an army of 11 monsters, and it says poisonous dragons, scorpion men. That's a fun read. Definitely read that Enuma Elish, because there are some very unique creatures in there that are like, those might still be around somewhere. But the whole point is she calls this army to destroy the younger gods. And then the result is Marduk defeats Tiamat by, so I think it says like blowing wind or blowing evil wind into her, like right into her mouth, like breathed into her, kind of like God breathed into existence things like we know about. It's like breathed into her mouth and then shot an arrow through her heart. I don't know exactly what that means, but he split the body then in two, and those two split to form, heavens and the earth. Now, from that same blood that was spilt from cutting this primordial parent, humans are created from this blood of her general Kingu, and they serve as laborers to the gods, the titans that, an equivalent of the titans that win against the Olympians, right? And that's our job. We labor. Or we do what you guys need. That kind of a deal. In the Vedic tradition, in this struggle, this conflict is seen as this eternal, like recurring cosmic cycle. So while the celestial beings and the power-seeking beings, right, so the Devas are the celestials, and then the Asuras are the beings that just want the power hungry, they battle for control all the time. So they're the whole point, which I thought was interesting here, it says over the three worlds and the nectar of immortality. Now, if you're asking me why is that important, it's because it says the nectar of immortality. So, okay, so they're not like immortal beings that can just live forever. they're fighting to, which I thought was interesting. Now, again, we already talked about how this is played out, right? These necessary human conflicts are then the extension of this drama. And where righteous order, so Dharma, requires the intervention of avatars, human avatars, like Krishna and the Mahabharata. I always say that wrong. It's just a lot of H and B's. Mahabharata. Thank you. To defeat those aligned with adharma, which is chaos and ego, right? Now, the Zoroastrianism, this light versus darkness, the siege of creation, this Ahura Mazda, which is light and order, and Angra Mainyu, which is darkness and chaos. Another version of this eternal cosmic siege, where the Angra Mainyu assaulted the perfect, flat, and illuminated world created by light and order. So it turned it into a place of mountains, violence, and night, which is an interesting thought. Fun to play with, actually. But, so the whole point is that this physical universe is just a battlefield, right, to ensnare and ultimately exhaust the power of evil. Now, the human role is that, again, it said like 12,000 years or something, but humans act as these soldiers whose good thoughts, words, and their actions and deeds like contribute to this final cosmic renovation, which it looks like fresh already, which is the time where evil will be rendered impotent forever. So eventually this will stop. They gave it 12,000 years. Now, this is interesting to the point where I already want to look it up. I'll do it later, and we'll go over it together. But very interesting stuff. Because I've always heard about Zoroastrianism as kind of like a spooky, it's like a mythy, spooky type thing. But I'm like, when I realized that it really influenced this light versus dark, order versus chaos thing that we have in the Western world, now I'm really going to look at it and go like, ooh, let's dive deeper. But, and again, in the Greek, right, Titans versus the Olympians, this represents something completely different, right, rather than the Mesopotamian one, where this is the transition from primeval, raw, like, instead of just being unorganized, raw power, it's now an organized divine law, right? It's organized divine order, and that is what the Titans do, right? It's not like the gods of Mesopotamia who just want to, like, be victorious and, like, yeah, we're going to get out of here. In the Mesopotamian epic, it sounds like they're the rebellious teens against mom and dad. God, you don't understand me. And then they just go for it. But, so in this one, Zeus and the Olympians, right? They revolt against their father, right? These primordial Kronos, these Titans. So, again, the stories are weird, but it's good to know. It's like, oh, they swallowed them to prevent prophecy of his own downfall. So it's like, okay, don't know what that means. Gonna swallow them. Now, in this Greek Titan versus Olympians, right? I always used to mix this up. The Titans are these primordial gods. And then the Olympians are the ones who revolt and take over. And so, to win, the Olympians have to free the Cyclops. And it's interesting, the Cyclops forges his bolt. So, and then this one is called 100-Handed Giants. Hectocheres? Anyway, so what they do is they overwhelm the Titans with a barrage of different things. But these beings, Tartarus, which is interesting and used one time to describe where fallen angels go, right? 2 Peter, I think. That's where Tartarus, right? Everything else doesn't mean what you think it means. I did a video on that earlier. But it's funny because we have both a Cyclops, big one-eyed giant, and then 100-handed giants. I wonder if that's a phrase like, oh, it's like they have 100 hands because they're so strong. I have no idea. But essentially gave them weapons to then overthrow this. So the result is the Titans were now put away in the abyss of Tartarus, where the fallen angels go in the early Christian text. And then so the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, divided the cosmos into sky, sea, and underworld, where Atlas then has to hold up the sky, right? Now, we get to since we brought that up, not that we're going to go through it, but again, in Jewish Christian ideology, this war in heaven, the perspective interprets this war zone. So human history as this place between the kingdom of God and then the rebellious spiritual forces at play. Now, again, this is Apocalypse of John, so Revelation. This idea of a war broke out in heaven, right? It's Michael, the archangel Michael, and then he's, top dog, top angel, and then his angels fight against the dragon, right? This, which is usually not determined to be, but it is this, like the idea of like, oh, the serpent, and then the dragon, and then Satan. We're not going anywhere with that on this one, but they were cast down to the earth. Now in the War Scroll, right, which is amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Sons of Light fight the Sons of Darkness. This provides, this War Scroll, a detailed military strategy for a final 40-year earthly battle that mirrors this heavenly conflict. So, this conflict is not just between people, but again, it's the same story we've been talking about the entire time. This is a ritual drama or play where humans participate in a spiritual battle between something of dualism, good and light, dark and evil, angels of light, demons of darkness, right? Now, I didn't even write a conclusion because I think this says enough, but it's the same thing. On all of these too, the human component is that we have the choice to make. So we can change stuff, right? There may be a cosmic, we might get like a glimpse of what's happening above that's coming down here, but we're still in the play. We're still acting the things out that we need to do. Now, can we tune it in to do things that are positive and do things that are negative? Yeah, but it's still up to us what happens here, right? I think that's a powerful piece of all these stories that we have to really try to combine, like especially in modern society, really get that dialed in. It's not that we're just kind of doing nothing, moving about, right? Even if it's a play, right? And this goes back to anything we've ever talked about in relating to holographic principle on the science side, all the way to what we're talking about now with this planet being the war zone drama, right? Even if it's like, well, I'm not in a play, this is my life. Yeah, you get to make the script, right? That's, from all of these, you get to pick how it plays out. Could some things be reflected? Yes. Could some other people be, quote unquote, these avatars or vessels for these other cosmic forces? Yeah. Now, I didn't really go into that, but video's already too long. But even if that isn't the case, you and I, who don't have to, we can choose, right? We can pick. So it's not like, we can just point to someone and go like, you're evil, and then just be okay with it and then walk away, right? You can go, I'm going to choose not to do that because that's evil, right? Not just point out someone, right? And that, to me, that seems like a more powerful statement for your own life and for the people around you. It'll spread faster than you trying to act dominant in something that we don't really know or understand. But at least the core piece is like, we may like act the play, right? Do what is righteous if that's what's believed to be done, but you get to pick to do that. Not because it said so, not because it was quoted to say so. You're choosing in a modern society to move that direction. That's where we need to be. Or at least working towards. Now, that is all that I have. I will see you next Tuesday.